Hello and welcome to Books Up Close. I'm Chris Lloyd. This is the close reading show for writers, readers, and anyone interested in how texts get made. In today's episode, I talked to Seth Insua about his 2025 novel, Human Animal. Seth is an Anglo-Spanish writer and artist. After graduating from the University of Oxford with a first in English language and literature, he spent some time working at creative agencies in London before moving north to become a freelance creative. He lives with his husband, David, between Newcastle and Tyne and Madrid. Two very different places, but yeah. Seth, welcome. Yeah. Nice to see you.
Hi. Hey, Chris. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, the Newcastle and Madrid thing is because my husband is a Geordie and I'm half Spanish. And so I'm here to kind of reconnect with my heritage, trying to practice the Spanish. And yeah, I like it here a lot.
How is your Spanish?
Oh my God, I don't know. It depends on the day. It depends on who I'm talking to. I had a really nice day a few weeks ago where the sales rep at my Spanish publisher was taking me around bookstores, and he was so great because he was very patient with me and he asked me a lot of questions and I was able to really practice. But sometimes I go into situations where people are just talking so fast and it's like, I don't know, watching a ping pong match or something, and I just can't follow it. So some days I'm like, I'm terrible, I'm not making any progress. And then other days I'm like, no, this is great.
Yeah, and I find Spanish like very fast when I listen to people. I'm like, whoa, this is, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I don't know, there are some linguistic studies on this stuff. And I think what they say is that every language ultimately conveys the same amount of information in the same period of time, but some are sort of phonically quicker, and Spanish is one of them. There's more syllables per minute, I think.
Yeah, I've always struggled with that. I mean, I'm not good at languages generally, but Spanish, I'm like, oh, it's a great language. I'd love to speak it, but well done on trying anyway.
Oh, thank you.
I'm excited to have you on to talk about this book. A, because I know you sent me a copy of this like a million years ago, so I'm sorry it's taken so long to get you on here.
That's okay.
But also because, I don't know, this is boring to some people, but like my academic work at the moment is writing about representations of non-human things in literature. So I kind of put this book aside for a while because I was like, I am actually animaled out in my primary reading. Because I've had to write a long book on, at least in American literature, the representation of animals and other non-human things. So then you sent me this book and you're like, Human Animal. I was like, more animals. I don't know if I can take it right now, but actually I'm still super interested in the topic. So yeah, it's a good one for us to discuss today.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to get your perspective then.
Yeah, I'm just so like immersed in animal-y adjectives and things that I'm not like it. I just see it everywhere now, and everyone's writing. It's quite fascinating. But before we get to the extract, how do you feel about close reading? You were about to say off the recording that you haven't done this for a while, but like, how do you feel about it as an activity or a practice? Or
how do I feel about it? I mean, I think it can be really useful. I don't know. I think it's a really interesting one because I remember getting quite into this, I suppose, before university, because I did a combined English language and literature A-level at school. And as a part of that, we did a lot of like discourse analysis. So we'd be looking at kind of, you know, the transcripts and not fiction. And then we would be applying the same tools to fiction and sort of digging into things in a lot of depth. And I really enjoyed that because I just like having more tools at my disposal and being able to approach things in different ways. And then it was at university that we started to kind of look at the theoretical underpinnings of different approaches to literature, I suppose. And like proper pure close reading is sort of new criticism, isn't it? And I remember being very into it, but my sort of overall view on this stuff is that any kind of literary theory and any kind of approach to literature should never be prescriptive. Like, we should never be telling any reader how to read, because art is just a human thing. It's an expression of our humanity, and everybody, no matter what level of kind of education or sort of formal study that they have, is going to have a kind of valid reaction to art. So I guess I'm sort of interested in like, I don't know, like reader response stuff. And I think that close reading can actually be an integral part of that. And I think that, you know, describing how people read is more interesting than prescribing how people should read. There's something about close reading that you kind of get into the craft of the text more. And you can still think about it from all kinds of different perspectives. So, you can think about it from a very personal perspective. You can think about interpretive communities. You can think about how someone might read this if they were from a particular background. And you can kind of adopt different readers' mindsets as you're doing that. So it can be a really illuminating exercise in that sense. And I also think that, I've heard people disparaging this kind of thing. And it was like that Susan Sontag against interpretation idea where it's like, oh my God, like it's not a puzzle that we need to decode.
Mm-hmm.
It's a text and we should just appreciate it in a natural way. But language is so rich and the creative use of language is so nuanced. And yeah, I think you can discover things. You can discover different things on different days, and different people will see different things in the text when they look closely. And for me, that's all just a part of it. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, that's perfect. I mean, yeah, and I think the idea of this kind of, or what, paranoid reading, right? That Eve Sedgwick would call it, where like you go to a text to uncover some kind of secret. Like I'm less interested in that than just like, wait, what is that word doing there? Like, what is the effect of that word, right? And the effect of that word in that sentence, I might see it one way, you might see it another way, and we have a dialogue about that. That's like the really interesting bit, right? I kind of wanted through this podcast to kind of be like, what do I do in a classroom, like in a literature classroom? Like let other people listen in on that kind of conversation. But the flip is that I'm doing it with the author. Usually in a literature classroom, my students are like, yeah, but what did Seth intend in that sentence? I'm like, I don't care. Seth's not here. His opinion's got nothing to do with our reading, right? But in this example, it's like, what would it mean to have you involved in that conversation? And if I'm like, why is that comma there? And you're like, I don't know, because it just felt right. Like that's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I think it'd be interesting for me, first of all, to look back at something that I actually wrote years ago now, to maybe try and tell you a little bit about my style, my writing, because I do think it's quite deliberate. I'm not a writer who has come to this without any education, right? Like I do things for a very specific reason. Whether or not readers like them is another matter. So to kind of have your point of view as reader, and then my sort of expression of intent will be maybe quite a rare thing.
Yeah, for sure. And for listeners, we're reading a passage from like, I don't know, a third of the way through. It's on page 119 if you have the VERVE paperback. And I'm going to ask Seth to read this kind of opening of this chapter in a second, but we might need to say that the book kind of oscillates between perspectives, right? We get the perspective of father and, I'm going to say child for gender neutral purposes here. And then a third perspective, which is a kind of historical perspective. We're not going to get into those other two because, we're going to do close reading, but, who knows what will come up. But this section is labeled son. But for listeners, I'm going to say they throughout when I refer to like the character who's speaking, because they've got a whole gender journey going on in this book. And at this point in the book, they are seen primarily as son, as he. But Tam, formerly Tom in the book, has a different kind of understanding of that. And I think this is one of those interesting moments where they're not thinking about gender, but they are thinking about some other stuff. So anyway, this is, from page 119. Seth, do you want to read it first and then we can go from there?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say very quickly that for anyone who doesn't know, this story is a kind of family saga set on a dairy farm that goes back many generations, and they're really struggling. And it's about the conflict really between a father and his son, his child, who's returned from university with a big secret and locked themselves away in their childhood bedroom. And essentially, they are railing against the family business, which is, a dairy farm. They have come out as vegan, and it's kind of in anticipation of coming out as non-binary. I mean, originally I kind of thought of that as a spoiler, but then my publisher decided that we should actually put that on the back cover in the blurb for like the reprint. So now it's just, it's one of the first things that you learn about it. Yeah, you can imagine coming out as vegan doesn't go very well and kind of confirms for Tam, that the family will reject them and it's only a matter of time. And you also find this out right at the beginning of the story, they secretly invite a group of animal rights activists called Livestock Aid to the farm to get some footage for their social media. So they kind of are attacking the family unit from within while also feeling very sad. So that's kind of the premise. Okay, shall I read?
Yeah, please.
On my dusty bedroom floor, I keep company with internet galleries of mistreated animals. Lambs nestled in the mulch of their decaying mothers. Dead horses, hollowed out in an abandoned paddock, their hooves like clown shoes on shrunken limbs. Pigs biting into their fallen brethren, eating them alive. When I was a child, Dad took me and Harry to the park to play football and invited some passing village boys to join in. I was not a natural. I stood there stupefied, shivering in the heat of the midday sun. Dad asked me, "Are you a man or a mouse?" Pigs in cages trample their young to death. Why must I think of such things? The incremental humiliations that built my early life. The stray balls and goalless kicks that tripped me up, that made my brother shout and the other boys jeer. And if we can't even count on parents to care for their children, what hope is there for our animals? We live in a time of industrial slaughterhouses and battery chickens, and Dad has become the crazed face of animal cruelty, red and roaring in a flickering mobile video. He is many things, and only a part of him is my father, who loves me. No wonder I am angry, pecked raw. In this day and age, the way we treat each other, I click and click. I self-soothe to visions of hell.
Yes, you get a good sense of this character's perspective, mind frame, the kind of language they use throughout. But this is a really kind of like interior moment for them in this passage that you selected, and I think is a really interesting one. Rereading it now, did anything stand out to you as you reread? Because I don't imagine you've read that passage aloud for a while.
Oh no, not for a long time. So I think the main thing that stands out to me is how sort of abrupt it feels, the kind of swinging from the personal to the political, like the domestic to the industrial.
Yep.
There aren't any transitions in there. There's a kind of bleeding of two different semantic fields and two different settings, and also the past and the present.
Yeah. But like that's the whole novel, right? Your summary there. Like the whole novel is the swing from the deeply personal to the kind of structural, the societal, the domestic and the intimate, like the personal and then the familial, right? I think that like he, like about Dad, he is many things and only a part of him is my father. Like the people are not just their roles, right? But in the book, in so many parts, like people are like, well, I'm this role, right? And this is what, like, you know, you are son, quote unquote, to me. I am father, I am farm owner, right? Like if you mess with those roles or transcend those roles, you're like causing the social order to collapse, right? Like, well, why wouldn't you eat meat? Why wouldn't you drink milk? Like that's just how society is. And it's like, what happens if people step outside of those roles? So I think that line of like, he is many things and only a part of him is my father who loves me is the kind of, actually there's a whole wealth of stuff inside everyone in this book that not everyone is willing to look at.
Yeah, I think you're right. That maybe that sentence in particular sort of sums up and exemplifies like a lot of what the novel is about. As is, I think also, you know, if we can't even count on parents to care for their children, what hope is there for our animals? There's also a sense that this whole passage is about power and hierarchies, and it kind of collapses there's like this implied hierarchy between humans and animals, and by the end that has been completely collapsed. You know, so Tam sees animals and humans as being on the same level, and also identifies as, you know, like a victim, like an oppressed, imprisoned animal trapped in the stasis of, you know, the dusty bedroom floor, low to the ground. You know, the opening sentence, I keep company with internet galleries. You don't normally keep company with something inanimate, but the internet galleries are not just a way of passing the time. Like the internet galleries of mistreated animals are sort of companions for Tam.
Although I think some of that language is interesting, right? Like, because like I keep company. Like sometimes Tam is a tiny bit like grandiose in like their phrasing. You know, even like pigs biting into their fallen brethren. You're like, girl, who like, you know, like there's a real sense of like a seriousness about them at all times, right? Like, because they care so
Yeah.
deeply about all of these things. And the later sections of the book, when they've moved to London and they're with the, like the hippier vegan crowd, and everyone's just like very like sincere about everything. And I'm like, okay, we all need to take a breath.
Yeah.
But even just that, like, I keep company, but also I keep company with internet galleries. Like, there is a real, like, I care really deeply, but I'm still online. And there's like a layer in between there, right? It's not, they're not out in the barn,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're like they're scrolling through photos of mistreated animals. Like, there's a real sense of that, like, online warrior element thing where it's just like, I'm going to be
Yeah.
perpetually online. I'm just going to doom scroll and through the night.
Yes. Yeah. You've really picked up on some of the kind of main tensions, I think, in Tam's character, because Tam to me is one of those young, like very idealistic people who's just come back from university and is like, I now know the answers. Like I have discovered things that none of you can ever have thought. Like, there's no way
Yeah.
you've ever thought about this. And it's like, maybe they have, and maybe they've just kind of come to their own conclusions, or maybe
Yeah.
they've made up their own minds about things. Tam is a little bit pretentious. Tam is pretentious in their language. Tam spends a lot of time thinking about how things should be and ideals rather than, the messy realities. And I think like Tam's journey is about kind of accepting that things aren't going to be perfect. People aren't going to be perfect. People are just sort of the products of their own environments and childhoods. And actually, you have to cut people some slack. Also, like, the bad things that happen to you, maybe not always the worst things that have ever happened to anyone. And, other people have had bad things happen to them too. And I also wanted to kind of capture how, so on the farm, Tam is the one who is least interested in the animals. Tam is not spending time with the animals, really. Tam doesn't like it when the chickens are pecking around their boots. Tam actually fits in better in an urban environment where you don't really have to think about the mess of life. And actually, that is where, progressive ideas about animals tend to be centered on cities, which I just find really interesting, because there's a lot of there are a lot of very interesting and compelling debates about the way that we treat animals. But it's funny that the people who feel strongest about that are often not living around the animals and are not in the countryside. I mean, there are lots of different reasons for that, which we don't need to go into now. But that's something that is there in Tam's perspective.
Yeah, there's like a remove, and it's just good. It's just great. There's internet galleries. Like, so many of the scenes of Tam, like, they're on YouTube or they're on their laptop or their phone, right? Like, the internet is a mediating thing for them, right? And then it's like, then the next couple of lines, lambs nestled in the mulch of their decaying mothers. Like, this is really like emotive, rich language, right? Dead horses hollowed out in an abandoned paddock, the hooves like clown shoes on shrunken limbs, pigs biting into their fallen brethren, eating them alive. Like, this real, I'm like, who are they narrating for here? It's like they're angering themselves, right? Primarily.
Yes,
But for us as reader, it's like super intense, and there's so much like sibilance that you put in there, right? Hooves, shoes, shrunken limbs, nestled
also,
mulch, mothers.
Yeah, I think like nestled and mothers, these are kind of from the semantic field of like children's books, right? So, and then like clown shoes, I mean, it kind of, the clown shoes thing sort of anticipates the humiliation narrative, that these are animals that are not treated with respect and they look ridiculous. But there's like a juxtaposition between, I suppose what could be soft maternal language about parents and children, and then this like horrifying language of decay and death. And yeah, you're right. It's very grandiose. It's very like, listen, everybody, like, yeah, you can see why Tam is drawn to Livestock Aid as an organization.
Yeah, for sure. And like, when you read it that way, you're like, yeah, this is horrific. Like, why aren't we all like, fighting? Like, it's really provocative language, and it really sucks you in. Although there's this like moment of like pigs biting their fallen brethren, eating them alive, which is like, even like the animals themselves are like feasting on each other, right? There's this element of like it's not just the humans that are bad, but like there's something about this scenario that has now gotten out of control, right? There's this kind of specter of chaos almost.
this is true, but also it then goes on to say pigs in cages trample their young to death. So like the
Yeah.
thing that is
Yeah.
to blame is imprisoning
Yeah.
animals, so they can't kind of express their natural behaviors.
Hmm.
And Tam also feels imprisoned, and like they can't
Yeah.
express their natural
Yeah.
behaviors. And yeah, there's this, I don't know, there's this sense of just being. It feels very obsessive. It feels kind of maniacal, and like Tam is just being pulled back in
Hmm.
cycles.
But the fact that you go from like eating them alive, full stop, new paragraph, when I was a child, like as you said at the beginning, there's this real kind of oscillation between this stuff that they're scrolling through online and then their feelings that keep coming up, right? And obviously
Yeah,
it's a scene about playing football, which is like, I had
yeah.
that pang in my body. I was like, no. But then they say, I was not a natural. I stood there
Mhm.
stupefied, shivering. Again, loads more sibilants here, right? That you followed through from that opening paragraph. But I was not a natural. Like you could easily misread that as I was not natural, right? Like what is
Mhm.
a natural
Mhm.
versus like what is natural? And the whole book is, what parts of gender are natural, what parts of like interspecies life are natural or unnatural, right? There's loads of those questions in the book. And just I was not a natural at like playing football, but like I was not a natural at like being a boy, right? Is part
Yeah,
of that.
yeah. And being my dad's son, and
Yeah.
then dad kind of asking, and there's the direct quote, "Are you a man or a mouse?" This very like very standard but kind of diminishing phrase that is shaming. And I don't know. I actually, just looking at this again, I think there's sort of an elided phrase at the beginning of this paragraph. So he's talking about how it feels to not be good enough, and also to be imprisoned, and also to be, I guess, like dehumanized. And it's almost an example. It's like a listed example. Like all of this stuff is happening. Look at these mistreated animals. For example, when I was a
Yeah.
child,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
happened to me. And it's like, it's actually slightly different. But
Mm.
in Tam's mind, the two things are the same.
Yeah. Entangled. But, and I think like for their benefit, the question, are you a man or a mouse, does install a kind of, there is like a species hierarchy, right? To use the theoretical language, where it's like being
Uh-huh.
a mouse is the small, pathetic thing, whereas a man is
Hmm.
like in control of themselves and of nature, right? And you're like, or like a mouse is pretty cool and they can run much faster than you can. And, like there is
Yeah, that's
we
true.
we
Yeah.
do have our human language is suffused with species hierarchy where like our species is better than other species, right? And there's like but the fact that that's gendered too, right? Are you a man or a mouse is like, are you also feminized, right? In some kind of way. Are you
Hmm.
feminized? Are you not quite grown up? So like this idea of like the good son, the good man is also about being the good human, right? It's like it's
Uh-huh.
about not lingering in some weird animalistic space, right? You need to be like strong and in control and in charge and all those kinds of weird things.
Yeah, and to be a kind of non-human animal is sort of synonymous in this with being subjected to something, to being a victim, to not being like an active agent in your own life. Um, but it's also interesting, again, looking at this now, that we sort of foreshadow Tam's realizations about their own father, because it's saying, pigs in cages trample their young to death. And this is just after reflecting on the way that George, the dad, is treating them and has treated them in their life. So it's kind of acknowledging that maybe George is in a cage of his own, which, the more we learn about George's perspective and the more
Yeah.
Tam learns about George's perspective, that's entirely true. Yeah, that's interesting.
And then that line, pigs in cages trample their young to death. Why, new sentence, why must I think of such things, comma, the incremental humiliations that built my entire life, the stray balls and goalless kicks, dot dot dot. And you're like, wait, you've done something. Why must I think of such things? You imagine they are referring to that previous sentence, right, of the pigs in cages, but they go straight into the incremental humiliations. And you're like, okay, fine, we're with the football, but also like, you're not a pig in a cage or you're
Uh-huh.
not the young being trampled to death, right? Like you might feel like you are, but you're not. But there's such like, but at the language of at the level of the sentence, sorry,
Hmm.
they're referring to two things at once. And I think that elision is quite
Hmm.
sneaky on your part, but also like it's a real example of their thinking of how all of
Hmm.
this is one and the same. There is a kind of flattening of experience. Like there's one thing to
Yeah.
say like our fates are entangled, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like queer people or like people who are mistreated or marginalized is like akin to the ways that, you know, animals are like oppressed in various ways.
Yeah.
But flattening those experiences is like, oh, well, that's something different, right? That's a different kind of thought you're having.
Yes.
And that's happening
Yeah.
at the sentence there where I was like, wait, that's not what, okay.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then there's a kind of attempt to draw these two things together and say, well, I'm sort of exploring my own experience of this person who is my father, but is the animal's farmer, in order to understand, like, why must it be this way, or why is it this way? If we can't even count on parents to care for the children, what hope is there for our animals? And Tam is kind of there saying, well, it's because they care about the animals, but actually, like, all of this is emotional, and it's coming from this sense of being kind of abused, like feeling abused. And dad has become the crazed face of animal cruelty. So, like, at this point, the father is sort of symbolic of all of the terrible abuses that are perpetrated by industrial slaughterhouses. And I don't know, like, that kind of red and roaring imagery it's almost demonic, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like the sort of flame lit face. No wonder
Yeah.
I am angry, packed raw. And then Tam sort of becomes one of the battery chickens.
Yeah, it's again, it's like, it's not just like a metaphor, it's a, or it's not like, it's not a simile, it's kind of metaphor, but it's also then, it's not, I'm not like a chicken, like I am a chicken, right? It's like a real kind of like collapsing of the two between them. But I also think that the crazed face of animal cruelty, red and roaring, like it made me think of, I was just googling then because I didn't want to miscite it, but like it's from like Red in Tooth and Claw, right, is the Tennyson quote, and maybe that wasn't even in your head, but it like makes me think of the Red in Tooth and Claw, which it's like in memoriam, is the kind of like the viscerality of like being alive, right, in a body, the kind of the brute fact of like life. And the dad is like, he is passionate, he is caring, but he's also forced into that position, right, by these people who get onto his farm and video him. Like in parts, I'm like, I feel sorry for him, right? You do feel sorry for him, and then other times I'm like, okay, but you're not making your life any easier. You could just like
Yes, yeah.
acknowledge that you are doing something that other people don't like, and instead he just always becomes this like face of resistance. Whereas Tam is also resistant, but like they present a face of like something else. So yeah, I think it's really interesting how this is all through Tam's mind, but in this latter part, they do a lot of, and if we can't even count on parents, we live in a time. There's a pulling us in as well, right? It's like, it's not just their thought. It's like, this is what we all agree on, right? Collectively.
Yes, yeah. It's very kind of collusive, and
Yes, that's the word.
yeah, I agree. I also think that the ending of this passage, I click and click, I self-soothe to visions of hell. I mean, like, there's a lot of talk about the self-soothing these days and well-being and all of that. And I think that actually we do all kind of self-soothe to visions of hell on the internet. I think that's like the modern, condition, human condition. But I also think there's something about the compulsiveness of like a click and click, and the way that Tam's mind is circling these things. It almost feels like masturbatory. Like there's pleasure in it, like sitting there self-soothing, clicking, being outraged, feeling like a victim, maybe not taking responsibility, but also like Tam has genuine grievances, but it's just that they're obviously very stuck.
Yeah.
And this passage suggests stuckness and stagnation.
But a real outward facing anger, right? Like it's like, I'm stuck in this small little space, but look, world, like look at the, it's like, it's always the question, right? In a first person narration, I'm like, who are they talking to, right? Like, part of the falsity of fiction is like, when there's a first person narrative, like, is there a sense that like there's a clear directed audience? Are they talking to themselves? Is this like part of their mind? And here it's almost like they're trying to persuade us as reader, and maybe even themselves, right? They're like, no, I do have a reason to dig into this, actually, right? If I find enough examples online of animals being mistreated, I have the evidence, right? I keep clicking, I'll keep clicking. And it's like, at what point do you need more like, they're being mistreated.
Yes, yeah.
Like, what more evidence do you need for this?
Yeah.
Like, make your own case to yourself or to your father or whomever. But yeah, the I click and click, the fact that you repeat click emphasizes that repetition, right? You're just clicking for the sake of it. It's not I click and scroll, or but I click and click is like, I'm just doing the repetitive motion, because the repetitive motion is the self-soothing, right? As you say, we all do it, right?
Yeah.
The doom scrolling, the motion, the algorithm is the thing. It just so happens that we're staring at like the abyss. Do you know what I mean? Like we've now the abyss is useful to us because it keeps us like in a state of like emergency or high alert almost. And for Tam, that's like, it's kind of debilitating for them. It's like, no, stop, log off, please log off.
For sure. I also think what you've just said is really interesting about who is the implied audience to a first-person narration, because I think that my approach to this generally is to imagine that we're just kind of getting a summary of, sensory impressions and thoughts as they come to the writer. Like I try to write quite simply and immediately. I'm not writing the sort of, it's literary fiction, but literary fiction tends to tell more than show and to focus a lot on kind of voice and perspectives on things and sort of digging into perspectives. And I actually think this passage that we've just gone through is quite unusual in this book, in that like it is this very sort of introspective. It's like, Tam is more introspective maybe than the father, but it is a moment where like everything is stopped. They are just sitting there. And I think it does just capture something. It's almost like a manifesto. It's like it captures how Tam sees the world, and you get a sense of somebody sitting and just working themselves up into, whereas like normally it's almost, I don't want to use the word cinematic, but it's like, it's quite visual a lot of the time. And it's quite just like, this is happening, this is what I see. And then I try and sort of write it in a way that captures like the very natural language that particular character would use. But here there's like a little bit more, it feels more rhetorical, right? Like it feels more persuasive and
That's
more like, like Tam is sort of working through something. It's not just like the natural everyday language that Tam would be using, even though Tam does tend towards pretension, which is just really interesting. I'd never really, I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote. I just knew that like I was trying to capture that like very specific feeling of like doom scrolling and obsessing over something.
I know,
like just to I'm sure we all do these days, but just to kind of give the listener a sense of what I mean. So we follow this, in this day and age, the way we treat each other. I click and click, I self-soothe to visions of hell. The next paragraph is, Mum drives me to the station the next day. She tells me a small check has arrived from a charity that helps struggling farmers, only she doesn't want me to tell Dad, who's proud about such things. So it just becomes much more like banal, or to like, what's that like Barthesian narrative code? It's like proairetic rather than like hermeneutic or symbolic, right? Like the code has completely shifted. And I think that's interesting. Like it's I don't know. I use the word manifesto again. That feels like a kind of manifesto.
It is. And the one thing I probably should have said at the beginning, this is what I tell my students to do, is like, this is all written in the present tense, right? Like not only is the book entirely in multiple first person narratives, but it's all present tense too. Like there is an immediacy to it, right? Like I keep company, not like I kept company, right? And that present tense is part of what you're saying, right? Trying to describe experience as it happens, or trying to capture experience as it happens. And there is more like manner of fact writing throughout, but then there are moments of like little poetic little bits where you're like, oh, something's happening here. And that's what I always tell people to like. Close reading is something's happening here. What's going on? Where is this come from? This isn't like the previous page, right? Like that's when you should like sit up a little bit in terms of, there's no one way to do close reading, but for me the best one is to be like, why is that word being used? That's not the word. That's not a word that person would use normally. Or the tone is different here. Why is the tone different? Why is the speech different or the sound different? Because that's like a real, it's a real good place to zoom in, to be like, something's happening. It's that like the tremble in the water, right? Like the Jurassic Park thing, right? You like you see the ripples, but you don't see the dinosaur for ages, right? You're seeing like an effect. And that's where I'm like, zoom in on that, look at that thing, because that will tell you so much about what's happening behind the scenes, if you like. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is fun. This is a good passage to talk about, actually.
Yeah.
You can take a tiny bit of a text and read so much into it.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about your writing more broadly, though. Do you have like a writing practice, whatever that means to you? Do you have like special chair, special socks, snacks, writing by hand, computer, like phone? I've had a lot of answers to this question, including writing in the bath, writing in bed, writing on trains, on the phone. So like,
Oh
yeah.
my God, no. I mean, I couldn't write in the bath. I'm not really a bath person actually, but I write anywhere and everywhere. And the main thing I would say is that I just can't sit still. I
Mm.
can't, like, I don't have a particular place because after 20 minutes of trying to write there, I would be struggling and I'd have to, like, I just have to keep moving. So
Mm-hmm.
at home in Newcastle, I will just move around the house, and I will also shift my kind of medium. So like I will write by hand, I will write on my phone, I will write on the laptop. Writing on my phone is usually something that I'll do if something comes to me. I mean, usually that is in the middle of the night
Mm-hmm.
or first thing in the morning. But like I normally write directly into a document on my Google Drive, which the title of which is "It Doesn't Matter If It's Shit," and that just helps unblock me. That I
Yeah.
can just write anything; it just doesn't matter. Get it down, and I also find like writing by hand really useful because it slightly slows me down, and then I find that I can process more as I'm doing it, and I'm less likely to self-edit as I write.
Mm.
So I don't know. I'll just like write something, and also even if I know that I'm not happy with it, it's fine. I just keep going, and there's something very satisfying about filling pages in a notebook, or I don't know. And then I will try to type that up like at the end of that day. And as
Right.
I type, I usually make some changes. But I don't know. I also find it really hard to write like on a train or I really admire people who are like, oh God, I'm so busy. I have like 20 minutes to write today and I'm going to do it. Because if I have 20 minutes free in the day, I am going on TikTok. And even if I really don't want to, like, I can't, I'm not a very like regulated person in that sense. I just wish that I was. But I don't know, like writing is something that I have always done. So it just sort of finds a way.
It just finds a way. And when you're like typing it, like you've got the "it doesn't matter if it's shit" document, but does it all stay on Google Drive then the whole novel? Or are you downloading it? Are you working on it on printing it out, or does it stay in that digital world?
When I finish my first draft, I will print it out and I will go through with like a red pen. And oh my God, it gets scribbled on a
Yeah.
lot. And I'll keep tidying it up until I'm ready to share it with my agent, I guess. And I don't know, I'm quite ruthless, I think, with myself. Like I'm not particularly precious about
Mm.
my writing. I obviously fall in love with my characters and my stories, and I think I write quite like troublesome people because those are the ones that I find most interesting. But then I don't know, like I think my main thing that I can be sort of sensitive about is I see them as not just characters. I see them as like representations of like real world,
Mm-hmm.
not like people that, not specific people, but like flawed, vulnerable people who are kind of deserving of love and care
Mm.
and healing and forgiveness and all of that. Yeah, like I'm happy to then like hack at a manuscript as long as we're sort of careful with it's like doing surgery, right?
Yeah.
You know, you want to kill the patient and you need to be mindful that you're sort of working on stuff that's real, right? And
Yeah,
there are
it's like
stakes.
alive. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not an abstracted kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
You said like you've always written. Do you have like a first memory of like writing, or like do you remember when you first did that as a kid?
I don't remember when I first did it, but when I say that I've always written, even before I could write, I was telling stories with pictures, and
Mm.
my mum would like staple them together into little books. I was that kid. I Because my other thing is that I'm an artist and
Mm-hmm.
illustrator, and so when I was very small, I guess I would just sort of copy stories that I already knew. So it'd be like fairy tales, or I was really obsessed, like weirdly obsessed with Disney's Pinocchio for several years. And like, I
Mm.
think the first word that I could write other than my name was Pinocchio. And there are about 20 surviving copies of, like me just drawing the story of Pinocchio,
Wow.
you know, with varying degrees of success, sort of slowly getting better. And then, yeah, like by the time I was like 5 or 6, I was definitely telling kind of original stories. I was really obsessed with hurricanes and tornadoes as well. So
Hmm.
like quite often I would tell a story and then just suddenly there'd be a tornado. And yeah,
Had you been watching
um,
The Wizard of Oz too much or something?
I was really into Wizard of Oz. What else was I into? Yeah, I mean that was a big one. I think I wrote my first. So the first like longer thing that I wrote, I was about 11, and it was Harry Potter fan fiction. So
Hmm.
Goblet of Fire had just come out.
Hmm.
I was really into that, and I couldn't wait for the next book. So I wrote this like terrible Harry Potter 5, and it was only about 100 pages long, but at the time that was significant. And then when I was like 12, I wrote a YA thriller called The Clippings, which I actually sent to a literary agent. It was a
Wow.
full-length novel, and they very kindly wrote back to me, rejecting it, but like in a very encouraging way.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and then I wrote like a terrible derivative fantasy trilogy as a teenager. And what happened was I was changing so much as a teenager that because it took me like it was over 1,000 pages long.
Oh my God.
And so yeah, this was like my main thing that I liked doing. I was that kid, and I just kept rewriting it because I would go back, I would like finish it, and then I'd go back to the beginning and be like, oh no. And then I would start like telling the whole story again. And then I went to uni. So like the reason that I chose to do English at uni is because one day I wanted to be a writer. It actually kind of killed it for me for a while because I just felt, I think, so intimidated
Yeah.
that, like, but there's no point in writing a novel unless it's going to be. I mean, I think I've got over that now. I just write whatever I'm
Yeah.
interested in. But that like transitional period of your sort of early adulthood where you maybe have some aspirations, but your own knowledge and experience can't keep up with them,
Yeah.
is a particularly challenging time for a writer. But yeah, so like it really has been a thing that I've done forever. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got now hundreds of manuscripts in your drawer that you could like take out and be like, maybe if we see a 3-part fantasy series, we'll know where it comes from.
Yeah, this is true. I do actually have quite a few things. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure those 100 pages of Goblet of Fire Next Step are better writing than anything that evil demon woman could do. So like I would read that book over the other ones any day.
I like to think so.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And if you like that stuff, you can find another podcast. It's okay. You said you're an illustrator. I didn't know this until now. Did you draw this then?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
That's
quite
like
make the connection there. Listeners,
yeah.
I will put this on the Instagram post so you can see it. But there's a beautiful little postcard that came with my copy of like the father looking out the window, looking quite horrified and scary. But oh, that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the opening of the novel.
Yeah.
Where George, the farmer, has just woken from a nightmare about cows getting out and trampling over his brother who's died, and he goes to the window, and his elderly mother is running around in the garden at night, and he's freaking out, and that's what I've drawn.
That's really cool. Yes, I will post that for everybody to see because I realize you can't see it on the audio format, but that's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, the question I ask everyone at the end is like, what books are you recommending to people? They can be old things, new things, things that haven't come out yet, stuff you go back to, whatever you like.
Okay, so it's just come out, and I think you've just had him on the podcast. Salim Haddad's
Oh,
new
Floodline.
novel, Floodlines. I absolutely loved it. I think it's probably my favourite novel of the last year. Cannot recommend it enough. I just think it's so fascinating. It just felt so real to me, so vital, so many fascinating characters, no easy answers to kind of some of the thorniest issues, I think, that we have today. I loved it. I just admired it so much.
Yeah, that book is great. Go back to episode 2. Listen to that conversation with Salim. Yeah, very like immersive book. very immersive, and
Mhm.
like real people. You know, like by the end of Human Animal, I was like, these people feel like 3-dimensional to me, right? In a way that I'm like, oh, I really care about this person, but now I don't care about this. You know, like I don't often with reading get sucked into character so much. Like I'm not a real big character reader. I'm like, I don't care if I like the character,
Okay,
couldn't care less,
interesting.
really.
Yeah.
You know, people like, oh, I can't read that book because the characters are annoying. I'm like, couldn't care less. I want
Yeah.
sentences and thoughts and things. But in this, I was like
Uh-huh.
really drawn in.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I'm the same actually. I mean like normally I don't find characters to be sort of straightforwardly likable, right? Like it's not
Mm,
something I look for at
yeah.
all.
I know people that
I would
do. If you go on Book Talk,
yeah.
it's just that.
Just that I didn't like this person, therefore
Yeah.
DNF.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so strange to me. Because I just think also actually one thing that I have found, this is not to complain about anyone who's read my book, because anyone who's read my book, even if they didn't like it, thank you. Thank you for reading my book. But I always find it interesting when people are like, ugh, I hated this character because they were really judgmental. And I'm like, you're kind of being judgmental right now. Like, this is a little bit hypocritical because, like, I don't know. I don't think there's anybody in my book who is just villainous. Like they're not. I mean, maybe Luke,
Mm.
if you don't want to kind of yeah. But I think if you actually spend some time like thinking about why Luke might be the way that he is. So Luke is like the head of Livestock Aid, and he's a social media influencer. But like everyone has reasons to be
Hmm.
who they are, and that's just life. That's I'm saying like pretty basic things because it's just a universal truth.
Yeah, when people are like, oh, the character was selfish, I'm like, are you not sometimes? Like that, not the
Exactly.
yeah. That always surprises me. But yes, Floodlines is a great recommendation. Did you want to recommend any others?
So, like a very different book that is coming out very soon is Fruit Fly by Josh Silver. It's more commercial. It is such a page turner.
Hmm.
It's darkly funny. It's about a kind of well off, successful novelist called Mallory who's had a bestseller, but then she's had writer's block and she's got married to this like very desirable husband who works in TV, and everyone's sort of jealous of her, but she is stagnating and really struggling. And she wants to write another bestseller, so she looks on Reddit to see what's selling these days, and it's like go dark, go sad, go gay, maybe not in that order. And so she downloads Grinder and she starts pretending to be a gay man and infiltrating the lives of some gay men and essentially exploiting this particular young man
Wow.
who's down on his luck in a lot of ways. And you get his perspective as well. I found it like very funny. The satire is funny and interesting, but I don't think that's like the lifeblood of the book, even though that seems to be one of the main angles that they're promoting.
Hmm.
I think it's more about like people doing terrible things and like sometimes how kind of thin the excuses are, that like there aren't sort of these grand redemptive narratives necessarily, that you can just sort of get deeper and deeper and deeper into bad behaviors without realizing that that's what you're doing. I mean, bad behaviors, that sounds very simplistic, but I think what I mean is destructive and exploitative behaviors. And I just found it so compelling. Like I had to find out what happened next. I read it so quickly. So feeling there's something very different, and
Yeah,
maybe that.
those are two great recommendations. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. It was nice to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For more queer fiction that thinks about community and environment, you could go back to episode 2 with Andrew McMillan or to episode 5 with Sean Hewitt. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. Give it 5 stars and share it with people on all of the places. Follow the show and me on Instagram. Tag me in any posts of episodes that you like. And if you can, please do fill out the feedback form that is linked in the show notes. You can also get show transcripts and more information by subscribing to the Substack. This show is made possible by an Impact Accelerator Award from the University of Hertfordshire and the Arts and Humanities Research Council.